made from only the finest sunflower seeds. It's a perfect way to enhance the taste of your family's favorite foods. Sunfoil cooking oil is more than just oil. It's the key to bring your family together over a delicious meal and making every bite taste better. Remember, the key ingredient to a great family meal is sunfoil. Tradition just tastes better.
This winter, as temperatures drop, join Africa Muslims Agency in extending a hand of warmth and comfort to those in need across South Africa. With just 160 Rand, you can provide a blanket, and for 320 Rand, you can gift a winter pack, ensuring warmth against the biting cold. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
The Breakfast Rush, brought to you courtesy of the Willow Tin Group, at the forefront of innovation, and one of the leading competitors in the South African FMCG market.
The views and opinions expressed by the presenters and guests of Radio Al Ansar are not necessarily the views and opinions of Radio Al Ansar and the Al Ansar Foundation.
So President Cyril Ramaphosa says that more than 100 days of no load shedding should provide the encouragement to ensure energy security into the future. However, Ramaphosa has cautioned that the system remains vulnerable and they can't yet rule out the possibility of a return of further load shedding. Writing in his weekly newsletter, Ramaphosa credited the improvement to Eskom's generation operational recovery plan and maintenance. So, as I mentioned earlier, joining us this morning is PADAYACHEE, power and energy expert. He's also the former Eskom executive manager, as well as the former executive of City Power Johannesburg, Mr. PADAYACHEE, who's on screen right now as well. He's got his microphone muted. Mr. PADAYACHEE, unmute your microphone, and a very good morning to you, sir, and welcome to the Breakfast Rush on Radio Al Ansar.
Salam alaikum, and a very good morning to you, Michelle, and your listeners. Many thanks for inviting me to your show on this very cold and chilly Joburg morning. I'm glad to be here.
What a pleasure to have you. And I'm just looking, at the screen right now. I see you with a jersey, with a jacket, with a scarf, nice and warm in your office early in the morning. Thank you for making the time and joining us on the program. What factors have contributed to us having surpassed 100 days with no load shedding?
Well, I think there's many factors, but firstly, I think maybe just to preface my comment is just to express my personal gratitude and compliments to the Eskom team and to the Ministry of, well, now I call it DEE, Department of Energy and Electricity, for the excellent work that they've done over the past year and a half in arriving at this situation now. So I think I must express my kudos to them. Yes, I think there were a number of factors that contributed to that. One of them, number of them is the low demand, albeit we are kind of in the middle of winter, not middle, but normally third week in July is the middle. The increased use of solar rooftops, the increased use of OCGTs, albeit at a lower level last year, the increased good performance of the coal-fired fleet, and the contribution by the private sector and the National Electricity Climate Committee, Crisis Committee. But there's one important factor which I left to the end is the good leadership. The good leadership from a number of people, but especially from the Eskom board, the executive leadership from the ministry, and which is, and very importantly, the big difference now, Michelle, is that it is complemented, which I think this team has brought to the table, a high performance culture. A high performance culture, which I consider to be the X factor that's made the difference. And this high performance culture was prevalent in generation. I come from generation, which was prevalent in Eskom generation in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And generation being a very complex machinery, engineering infrastructure requires a high-performance culture, and I think we are in that stage now, Michelle.
Indeed, there are some municipalities that have experienced power outages or load reduction, as they call it. Do you perhaps think that Eskom has shifted to load reduction as opposed to load shedding?
Well, there is a difference between load shedding and load reduction. Very simply, load shedding is a national imperative. It's initiatives and procedures and mechanisms that take place to protect the national grid. Load reduction, which is also applied by Eskom about a year and a half, 2 years ago, now being applied by municipalities, mainly City Power, Shwani, is an attempt to protect the local grid where from damages, etc., where they intentionally and consciously reduce the load on the grid to protect equipment like transformers, etc. And that's also due to many reasons. But one of the major reasons that's due to illegal connections. In other words, as engineers, we design the grid for a certain capacity, but when that grid gets overloaded, overcapacitated, in this case by illegal connections, etc., then the system operator, in this case at the local level, has to reduce the load to prevent damage and, of course, to prevent the grid from collapsing locally. Michelle.
So just to, expand and elaborate a little bit more on what you just mentioned, the Minister of Electricity briefed media yesterday and mentioned that generation capacity has increased, hence such a long time without load shedding. Initially, what did you think was the cause of Eskom's issues with generating enough capacity?
Well, maybe just to take a step back, we need two critical factors to get the efficient and effective performance of the grid. We need obviously a reasonably performing grid that can what you call transport the electrons that gets generated. So we need energy, coal, nuclear, gas, etc., to produce energy, and we need a effective infrastructure to transport those electrons. Eskom generation had both those problems. So we didn't have enough energy. We still don't have that now, although we've made up. So we don't have enough electrons, but we've made up. But then we had a very poor performing infrastructure. We're still not out of the woods. There's a risk. Especially the coal-fired fleet, due to state capture, corruption, due to poor performance, poor maintenance, etc., we dropped the ball. So, and that's indicative, as you know, by what we call the energy availability factor. The energy availability factor used to be in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. It dropped down to about 50%. Now, as the minister had indicated, that's been recovered, and I think we're sitting close to the late 60s and early 70s. So one of the greatest achievements in getting this plus or minus 100 days good performance is that the performance of the grid has improved, plus Medupi and Kusile, which are the new power stations, which should have worked, come on the grid many years ago, but due to corruption that didn't happen. At least now those units are coming back on the grid, and hence we're getting more electrons and better performance, Michelle.
Absolutely. So, final question for you this morning. In order for continued load shedding free days in South Africa, what more should be done to ensure that generation capacity continues to increase?
I'm glad you asked the question. It's an excellent question. We need still two things. We need this effective and efficient and top-notch leadership to continue. That's fine. We need lots more electrons on the grid, and this is where the renewables will come in, the solar rooftops, the wind, etc. We need that to continue. But more importantly, Michelle, and where the risk is at the moment is that Eskom generation does not have any reserve margin or what we call headroom. In other words, according to global norms, you need 10 to 15% of additional capacity above the maximum demand. So if the maximum demand in winter, which we expect it to be 33,000 megawatts, then we need 10 to 15% above that. So we need about 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts more. So we need the fleet to perform at about 37,000, 38,000 megawatts, so that the additional capacity or the additional megawatts allows the national system operator and control center to cushion any breakdowns on the system. In other words, when there's a breakdown, by having this additional capacity, you and I, as the customer, don't see it on the grid. Unfortunately, now we see it. By not having the additional capacity, we see that on the grid, right? Immediately, and it also forces the system operator to use the open cycle gas turbine, hence additional diesel a lot more. So what we need, in very simple terms, and I think we're getting there, it'll take some time, we need a reserve capacity of 10 to 15%. Actually, in the early 2000s, we had the luxury of having 20% additional capacity in the good old days, Michelle.
Mr. Padayachee, I want to thank you for your time this morning, and especially on this cold winter morning, getting out of bed so early to join us on the program. We do appreciate your expert opinion on the subject this morning. Thank you, and have a wonderful day going ahead.
My pleasure, and thank you very much.
So there you go. That was Mr. Vali Padayachee, power and energy expert, the former Eskom executive manager, as well as former executive of City Power Johannesburg, just lending his thoughts to the subject at hand. I don't want to use the term celebrating 100 days without load shedding in South Africa, but we do appreciate it. So to everybody who's working extra hard at Eskom and just making sure, thank you very much for doing your job. We do appreciate it. So those of you that have been watching the live stream of the interview, we're going to cut this live stream and come back with another live stream just moments from now, where we get into the Vodacom Hangman game. Remember, you're playing to win a brand new laptop from our set of Vodacom stores. So if you want it to be you, then you got to call in 0861 904 904 to enter into the Vodacom Hangman game. The reason we do a live stream is so that you can see all of the letters and the placements and that uncle. Yeah, you can see all of those things. So Hangman coming up with Vodacom